I still remember the exact moment my life split into two parts. There was the woman I used to be, and the woman I became after my husband looked me in the eyes and chose someone else. People often ask me when I knew my marriage was over, was it the day I found the messages? The day he stopped saying, "I love you"? Or the day he walked out of our home? No, it was much earlier than that. It was the day he smiled proudly and said, "I'd like you to meet my new secretary." I reached out my hand with a polite smile. She looked young, confident, and charming. She shook my hand and said, "I've heard so much about you." If only I had known what those words really meant. If only I had known she wasn't entering our lives to help my husband with work. She was there to take my place. At that moment, I ignored the strange feeling in my chest. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, I trusted my husband with everything. We had spent 12 years building a life together. We had survived financial struggles, family problems, and endless sleepless nights while chasing our dreams. I believed nothing could break us. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, little things began to change. He started coming home later than usual. His phone was always face down. Whenever it buzzed, he would smile for just a second before quickly hiding the screen. When I asked who it was, he always had the same answer. Just work. I wanted to believe him. Love has a strange way of making us ignore the truth standing right in front of us. One evening, I prepared his favorite dinner. The candles were lit. The table looked beautiful. I waited 30 minutes, 1 hour. Then my phone rang. "I have an important meeting," he said. "Don't wait for me." I quietly blew out the candles and put the food away. I ate alone, again. That night, as I stood at the kitchen window, I watched the rain fall outside. For the first time in years, I felt lonely inside my own marriage. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened 3 days later. I wasn't looking for answers. I wasn't trying to spy on him. Fate simply decided that the truth had hidden long enough. His phone lit up on the coffee table while he was taking a shower. I wasn't going to touch it. Then another message appeared on the screen. It wasn't the notification that made my heart stop. It was the name, not Emily, office, not secretary, just Emily with a heart. My hand started shaking. A second message appeared before the screen went dark. "I already miss you. Today was perfect. I wish she knew the truth." In that single moment, the woman I had been for 12 years disappeared. The tears didn't come right away. Neither did the anger. There was only silence. The kind of silence that changes a person forever. I didn't know it yet. But that message wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his biggest regret. Because the man who thought he had replaced me had no idea that one day he would beg for the life he had so carelessly thrown away. If someone had asked me a year earlier whether I trusted my husband, I would have answered without hesitation. With my whole heart. To everyone around us, we looked like the perfect couple. We weren't the richest family, and we didn't live in a huge house, but we had built a life filled with love, laughter, and dreams. At least, that's what I believed. I met Daniel when I was 24. He was kind, hard-working, and full of ambition. On our first date, he told me, "I don't have much right now, but one day I'll give you a beautiful life." I smiled and told him I didn't need a beautiful life. I just wanted a man who would never stop choosing me. Back then, I truly believed I had found him. The first few years of our marriage were not easy. Money was tight, and there were months when we had to count every dollar before buying groceries. We shared a tiny apartment where the roof leaked whenever it rained. Instead of complaining, we laughed about it, placing buckets around the living room and pretending we were camping indoors. Those difficult years brought us closer. Every challenge felt like something we could face together. When Daniel wanted to start his own company, everyone warned him against it. His friends said it was too risky. His parents thought he should keep his stable job. I was the only one who believed in him without question. I worked extra hours so we could pay the bills while he focused on building the business. I canceled vacations, sold some of my jewelry, and even used the savings I had kept for years. None of it felt like a sacrifice, because I believed we were building our future together. When his company finally became successful, I felt just as proud as he did. "This is our success," he would always say, wrapping his arms around me. Those words meant everything to me. As the business grew, so did the demands on his time. He attended more meetings, traveled more often, and answered work calls even during dinner. I told myself it was only a busy season. Success always came with extra responsibility. Then one evening, he mentioned they needed more staff. "We're hiring a new secretary," he said casually while scrolling through emails. I barely looked up from my plate. "That's good," I replied with a smile. "Maybe you'll finally stop bringing work home." He laughed. "I hope so." At the time, those words seemed completely ordinary. A week later, he introduced me to Emily at a company event. She was young, confident, and spoke with effortless charm. She complimented my dress and thanked me for supporting Daniel throughout the years. "You've been his biggest inspiration," she said warmly. Her kindness made me lower every guard I had. As we drove home that night, Daniel couldn't stop talking about how talented she was. "She's incredibly organized," he said. "Honestly, I don't know how I managed before she joined." I smiled and agreed. I thought he was simply happy to have found a great employee. I never imagined that the woman I welcomed with kindness would slowly become the biggest threat to my marriage. And while I was celebrating the life we had built together, someone else had already begun planning a place inside it. After meeting Emily, life seemed normal on the surface. Daniel still kissed me goodbye every morning. Before leaving for work, he still asked about my day and thanked me for dinner. If someone had looked at us from the outside, they would have seen a happy couple living an ordinary life. But the small changes kept growing. At first, they were easy to ignore. Daniel began staying at the office later than usual. Every evening, there was another excuse. "We're preparing for a new client. The team has a deadline. I'll be home soon." I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Love has a way of convincing you that trust is stronger than doubt. Then came the weekends. Daniel used to protect our Saturdays like they were sacred. We would have breakfast together, visit the local market, or spend hours watching old movies on the couch. Now, Saturdays became emergency work days. "I'll make it up to you." He promised every time. I smiled and nodded, but those promises slowly turned into empty words. One evening, while we were having dinner, his phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up for just a second. I wasn't trying to look. My eyes simply caught the name, Emily. Daniel grabbed the phone so quickly that he almost knocked over his glass of water. "It's just work," he said before I even asked. His answer came too fast, too prepared. That was the first moment my heart whispered something my mind refused to accept. A few days later, he started protecting his phone like it contained secrets worth hiding. He changed his password. He carried it everywhere, even into the bathroom. If I walked into the room while he was texting, the screen disappeared before I could see it. Every little moment by itself seemed harmless. Together, they painted a picture I didn't want to see. I kept telling myself I was overthinking. I didn't want to become the jealous wife who questioned every late meeting and every missed call. So I stayed silent. Then came the night that changed everything. I had prepared his favorite meal. The candles were lit. It was our wedding anniversary. I had even bought him a small watch he had admired months earlier. 7 o'clock came, then 8, then 9. Finally, my phone rang. "I'm so sorry," Daniel said. "The meeting ran much longer than expected. Don't wait for me." His voice sounded distant, almost distracted. I wished him good night, hung up, and stared at the untouched dinner sitting on the table. The candles had burned all the way down. For the first time in 12 years, my husband had forgotten our anniversary. Not because he was careless, because someone else had become more important. I cried myself to sleep that night. The next morning, Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He apologized, handed me a bouquet of flowers, and blamed the pressure at work. Part of me wanted to believe him. The other part had already started noticing the cracks. 3 days later, fate handed me the truth. Daniel was taking a shower after coming home late again. His phone rested on the coffee table. I wasn't planning to touch it. Then the screen lit up. A message appeared before it locked again. Emily. My heartbeat stopped. A second message flashed across the screen. Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you. I froze. My hands trembled so badly that I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling. It felt like all the air had been pulled from the room. There it was, the answer I had been afraid to find. Every late meeting, every broken promise, every excuse, every lie. None of it had been about work. The bathroom door was still closed. The shower was still running. For a few seconds, I stood there staring at the phone, wondering if I should unlock it. A part of me wanted more proof. Another part already knew enough. You don't save someone's name with a heart unless they mean something your wife never should have to compete with. The tears finally came, not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears rolling down my face as 12 years of trust collapsed in front of me. I looked around the house we had built together, every picture on the wall, every memory, every promise. Suddenly, they all felt like pieces of a beautiful story that had never been real. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone across the room. Instead, I quietly wiped away my tears, placed the phone exactly where I had found it, and made one decision. Before I said a single word, I was going to learn the whole truth. Because if my husband had been living a double life, I wanted to know just how deep his betrayal really went. The next few days were the longest of my life. Every morning, Daniel kissed me goodbye as if nothing had changed. Every night, he came home with another excuse. And every time he smiled at me, I wondered how someone could lie so easily to the person who had loved him through everything. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I watched. I listened. I paid attention to the little details I had ignored for months. The truth revealed itself faster than I expected. One Friday evening, Daniel told me he had to attend an important business dinner with a client. I probably won't be home until late, he said while adjusting his tie. I smiled politely. I hope the meeting goes well. The moment he left, a strange feeling settled in my chest. I wasn't planning to follow him, but something inside me refused to let the night end with another lie. An hour later, I drove toward the restaurant where he claimed the meeting was taking place. The parking lot was almost empty. His car wasn't there. I sat behind the steering wheel, staring at the entrance, trying to convince myself there had to be an explanation. Then my phone buzzed. It was one of Daniel's co-workers, Lisa. She had no idea what was happening. I hope you two enjoy your anniversary trip next month, she texted. Confused, I replied. Daniel said he's at a client dinner tonight. A few seconds later, 3 dots appeared. Then her reply came. Client dinner? There wasn't any meeting scheduled tonight. I felt my heart sink. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I thanked her, put my phone down, and simply sat there in silence. The last piece of hope I had been holding on to disappeared. Without thinking, I started driving, not toward home, but toward the apartment building where I had once dropped Daniel after an office event. He had mentioned that Emily lived nearby. I don't know why I went there. Maybe I was searching for proof. Maybe I was searching for the courage to face the truth. As I turned onto the quiet street, I saw his car, parked right outside her building. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, every excuse, every late night, every broken promise. They all came crashing together in that single moment. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't knock on the door. Some truths don't need words. Seeing his car there was enough. I drove home with tears blurring my vision. When Daniel finally walked through the front door after midnight, he smiled as if everything was normal. The meeting went well. he said. I looked into his eyes. For the first time in 12 years, I saw a stranger. I wanted to tell him I knew. I wanted to ask why. Instead, I quietly said, "I'm glad you got home safely." He smiled, thanked me, and went upstairs. The next morning, I made him breakfast just like always. He probably thought I knew nothing. He had no idea I was saying goodbye to the man I used to love. 3 days later, he came home earlier than usual. His face was serious. "We need to talk," he said. Those 4 words felt heavier than anything I'd ever heard. We sat across from each other in complete silence. Finally, he took a deep breath. "I've been unhappy for a long time." The sentence cut deeper than I expected. He didn't mention the years we had spent building our life. He didn't mention the sacrifices we had made together. Instead, he spoke as though our marriage had simply become an inconvenience. Then he said the words that changed everything. "I've fallen in love with someone else." Even though I already knew, hearing it from his own mouth shattered something inside me. He looked down at the floor. "It's Emily." The room became painfully quiet. After a long pause, he added, "She understands me in ways you don't." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. The woman who had known him for less than a year had somehow replaced the wife who had stood beside him for 12. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him of every dream we had shared, every struggle we had survived, every promise he had made. But I realized something. No words could change the choice he had already made, so I stood up, wiped away my tears, and asked only one question. "When are you leaving?" He looked surprised. I thought you'd fight for us." A sad smile appeared on my face. "I already did," I whispered, "for 12 years. The next morning, Daniel packed his suitcase and walked out of our home. He believed he was leaving behind a failed marriage for a better future. As I watched the front door close behind him, my heart broke. But deep inside, another feeling quietly took its place. Not hatred, not revenge. Determination. Because the man who walked away believing he had won had no idea that one day he would stand at that same door again, begging to come home. The first few weeks after Daniel left were the hardest days of my life. The house felt painfully quiet. His coffee mug was still in the kitchen. His favorite chair sat empty by the window. Even the sound of the clock on the wall seemed louder than before. Every corner of the house reminded me of the life we had built together and the future we would never have. At first, I cried every morning. I cried while making breakfast for one. I cried while folding clothes that no longer belonged to anyone. I cried myself to sleep, wondering how the man who once promised to love me forever could walk away so easily. Friends called to check on me. Some offered kind words. Others tried to convince me to fight for my marriage. But I already knew the truth. You cannot force someone to value a heart they have already chosen to leave behind. One afternoon, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. My eyes were swollen, my shoulders were slumped. For a moment, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Then I asked myself one simple question. If I keep living like this, what will be left of me in a year? The answer terrified me. That was the day I stopped waiting for Daniel to regret his decision. Instead, I decided to rebuild the woman he had underestimated. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. For the first time in weeks, I made my bed instead of crawling back into it. I opened every curtain in the house and let the sunlight in. It felt like I was opening the door to a new chapter. I joined a fitness class, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted my strength back. I started reading again. I took online business courses that I had postponed for years, while helping Daniel grow his company. Most importantly, I accepted a job offer from a small marketing firm. The salary wasn't impressive, but it gave me something far more valuable. Purpose every day, I learned new skills. I stayed late, asked questions, and worked harder than anyone expected. Slowly, people began noticing my dedication. Within months, I was promoted to lead a major project. For the first time in years, people weren't introducing me as Daniel's wife. They knew me by my own name. That feeling was priceless. Around the same time, I heard small pieces of news about Daniel. His relationship with Emily wasn't as perfect as everyone believed. The excitement that had once brought them together had begun to fade. Coworkers whispered that they argued constantly. Important employees had started leaving the company. Some clients had quietly taken their business elsewhere. I didn't celebrate his problems. I simply realized something important. A relationship built on betrayal rarely brings lasting peace. One afternoon, nearly a year after our separation, I attended a business conference. Ironically, my company had been invited to present one of our newest marketing campaigns. As I walked across the stage to accept an award, the audience applauded. Standing near the back of the room, I noticed a familiar face, Daniel. Our eyes met for the first time in almost a year. He looked older, more tired. The confident smile I remembered had disappeared. For a few seconds, he simply stared at me as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I smiled politely, accepted my award, and continued my speech. I didn't mention him. I didn't need to. The woman standing on that stage was no longer the broken wife he had left behind. She was stronger, confident, independent. As the applause filled the room, I realized something that made me smile from the heart. The greatest revenge had never been making Daniel suffer. It was proving to myself that my happiness had never depended on the man who walked away. And judging by the look in his eyes, he had finally begun to understand exactly what he had lost. After the conference, I expected Daniel to disappear from my life again. Instead, his name started appearing in conversations I never asked to hear. People from the business world talked quietly about his company. The success he had once been so proud of was beginning to fade. One client after another ended their contracts. 2 of his most trusted employees resigned within the same month. The office that had once been full of energy now felt tense and uncertain. At first, I thought they were just rumors. Then one afternoon, I ran into Lisa, one of Daniel's former coworkers, at a coffee shop. After a few minutes of catching up, she sighed. "You probably don't know this," she said, "but things haven't been going well for Daniel." I stayed silent. She continued carefully. "Emily left the company 3 months ago." I looked at her, surprised. "She left?" Lisa nodded. "Not only the company, she left Daniel too." For a moment, neither of us spoke. "The relationship wasn't what he expected," Lisa explained. "Once the excitement disappeared, all they did was argue. She accepted a job in another city and walked away without looking back." I couldn't believe it. The woman Daniel had chosen over 12 years of marriage had left him just as easily as she had entered his life. But karma wasn't finished. Without Emily managing his schedule and several key employees gone, Daniel struggled to keep the business running. His confidence disappeared. Clients noticed the change. Investors pulled back. The company he had spent years building slowly began losing its place in the market. As I listened, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel angry either. I simply felt free. For months, I had wondered why someone would throw away loyalty for a temporary thrill. Now I had my answer. Shortcuts often lead to dead ends. That evening, as I drove home, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then a message appeared. "Hi, it's Daniel. I know I don't deserve a reply, but can we please talk? Just once." I stared at the screen. A year earlier, I would have answered before the second ring. Now, I placed the phone back on the passenger seat and continued driving. Because for the first time since he walked away, my peace was worth more than hearing another apology. Still, deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. Daniel wasn't reaching out because he missed me. He was reaching out because, for the first time in his life, he finally understood the value of the woman he had so carelessly let go. 3 days after Daniel's message, there was a knock at my front door. I already knew who it was before I looked through the window. He stood there, holding a small bouquet of white lilies, the same flowers he had given me on our wedding day. For a moment, I simply stared at him. He looked different. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a plain jacket that looked worn from months of stress. The confidence that once filled every room had disappeared. His shoulders were heavy, and his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Why are you here?" He lowered his head. "I made the biggest mistake of my life. Those words would have broken me a year ago. Now, they only sounded late." "I thought leaving would make me happier," he admitted quietly. "I thought the excitement meant I had found something better. But I was wrong. For the first time since our marriage ended, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Not just for the affair, but for throwing away the woman who stood by me when I had nothing." Tears filled his eyes. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but if there's even a small part of you that can forgive me, I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I smiled, not because I wanted him back, but because I had finally found peace. "Daniel," I said softly, "I forgave you a long time ago." Hope lit up his face, then I continued, "But forgiveness doesn't mean going backward." His smile slowly disappeared. "You didn't lose me when you walked out that door," I said. "You lost me the day you stopped valuing the person who loved you the most." Silence filled the space between us. I wished him well then, with no anger in my heart and no tears left to cry. I gently closed the door. As I walked back into my home, I realized something beautiful. The greatest revenge had never been making him regret his choices. It was becoming someone who no longer needed him. And outside that closed door, Daniel finally understood a painful truth. Some mistakes can be forgiven, but they can never be undone.